Ladies and gentlemen, I want to speak to you today about something that may shake your heart, but it may also set your soul free. We live in a world where kindness is a virtue, yes, a gift from God Himself. But hear me now, even the purest gifts can be twisted, misused, and exploited. The Bible tells us to love one another, but it does not tell us to surrender our God-given dignity to manipulation and pride. Today I want to talk to you about a hard truth. Stop being kind to a narcissist, because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no more. There are people who wear masks of charm, who thrive on praise and control, and they will drain the life from your spirit if you let them. But my friend, you were not made to be a doormat. You were made in the image of God, strong, worthy, and free. Kindness is one of the most beautiful virtues a human being can possess. It reflects the heart of compassion, mercy, and love. It is the very nature of God flowing through us into the world. But there is a line, often invisible, often blurred, between kindness and enabling, between showing grace and allowing yourself to be manipulated. And when that line is crossed, something sacred within us begins to suffer. There are times when kindness becomes a form of self-betrayal. It happens subtly. You start by excusing bad behavior, justifying someone's arrogance, their condescension, their lack of empathy. You tell yourself they've had a rough past, or they don't mean to be this way. You rationalize the emotional abuse because your heart wants to believe in their potential. But soon you find yourself constantly giving, constantly forgiving, constantly accommodating. You compromise your boundaries, you silence your own voice, and you carry burdens that were never yours to carry. The narcissist thrives in this dynamic. They see your kindness not as strength, but as weakness. Not as love, but as a resource. They feed off your empathy, your need for peace, your willingness to see the good in people. They charm, they flatter, they manipulate, and they twist your kindness into a leash that keeps you under their control. And while you believe you're being kind, what's really happening is the slow erosion of your self-worth. God did not design kindness to be weaponized. He did not call you to love others at the expense of your own soul. Yet that is exactly what happens when you extend kindness without boundaries to someone who only takes, never gives, and refuses to acknowledge their own brokenness. That is not selflessness. That is self-neglect, and it is not holy. Some of us were raised to believe that turning the other cheek means standing in the fire and smiling while it burns. But turning the other cheek doesn't mean returning to a toxic pattern. It doesn't mean tolerating lies, manipulation, and emotional harm for the sake of keeping the peace. Jesus turned tables when the temple was being defiled. He walked away from those who refused truth. He confronted hypocrisy. He didn't coddle it. When you are kind to a narcissist without discernment, you become complicit in their illusion. You become the audience for their performance, the fuel for their ego, the justification for their pride. They don't change because there's no reason to. Why would they? You've made it comfortable for them to stay the same. That's not love. That's captivity. And yet so many people remain trapped in this dynamic because they fear what will happen if they stop being kind. They fear being called cold, harsh, unforgiving. They fear rejection. But those fears are rooted in lies. Lies that say your worth is tied to how much you can endure. Lies that say love is measured by sacrifice without limit. Lies that confuse passivity with peace. True kindness is powerful, not passive. It knows when to say yes, but it also knows when to say no more. It understands that boundaries are not walls, they are gates of wisdom. They protect what is sacred inside of you. When you begin to walk in that kind of kindness, it may look like confrontation. It may look like silence. It may look like distance, but it is still kindness. Only now, it is kindness with clarity. You were not created to be the emotional supply for someone else's dysfunction. You were not made to be drained, dismissed, and diminished. That's not humility. That's harm. And when you continue to show kindness to someone who refuses to honor it, you're not just hurting yourself. You're also enabling their brokenness to grow unchecked. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away, not out of bitterness, not out of anger, but out of truth. God's word says to guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Guarding your heart does not mean shutting it off. It means being wise with where you pour it out. Kindness without boundaries is like water poured into a broken cup. No matter how much you give, it will never be enough. And slowly, you will run dry. God calls us to love. It is the very foundation of our faith. Love your neighbor. Love your enemies. Love without condition. But love in its purest and truest form does not mean allowing yourself to be used, abused, or discarded. God never intended for love to be a doorway for harm. And yet so many of us have confused loving others with losing ourselves. There's a common misunderstanding, especially among people with compassionate hearts, that love means tolerating anything and everything, that no matter how someone treats you, no matter how much pain they cause, you're supposed to keep forgiving, keep serving, keep giving them more chances. But that is not the love God calls us to. That is not divine love. That is distortion. God's love is holy. It is just, it is pure, and it is never one-sided. When you keep extending love to someone who refuses to receive it with humility, someone who twists it, exploits it, and uses it as leverage for control, you are no longer loving them in truth. You are feeding their pride. You are enabling their deception. Love rejoices with the truth, not with lies. Love holds accountable. Love does not make peace with darkness. God's love transforms. It doesn't placate. Narcissists often know how to use the language of love. They'll talk about loyalty, forgiveness, and faithfulness, but only when it benefits them. They expect unconditional love from others, yet offer nothing but conditional affection in return. They want your devotion, but they withhold empathy. They want your service, but they give no sacrifice. They take and take, wrapping themselves in the language of relationship and connection, but never offering anything real from their own heart. They will remind you of your duty to love, while violating the very principles of that love daily. And many people fall into that trap because they believe it is godly to stay. They believe it is righteous to keep enduring. But God did not call you to endure abuse in the name of love. He called you to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. He called you to walk in truth, not denial. He called you to discern spirits, not excuse them. Jesus himself was love incarnate, and yet he didn't allow people to misuse him. He confronted the Pharisees. He walked away from cities that rejected him. He stood silent before those who accused him falsely. He loved people enough to speak the truth, and he loved himself enough to maintain his mission. His love was never naive. It was never manipulated. It was rooted in purpose and truth. When you continue to love someone who refuses to respect or reciprocate that love, you begin to disconnect from your own worth. You start to believe that love means sacrificing your voice, your needs, your joy. You start to think that if you could just love them more, they would finally change. But that's not your job. You cannot love someone into healing if they are committed to their pride. You cannot change a narcissist with patience and kindness alone. Only God can reach a heart that refuses to see itself. Your calling to love others does not override your calling to honor God. And honoring God includes honoring the body, the mind, and the spirit He gave you. If you let someone mistreat you in the name of love, you are not walking in obedience. You are walking in confusion. You are not honoring God. You are allowing someone to play God in your life. That's not faithfulness. That's bondage. Loving others should never require you to betray yourself. True love invites you to grow. It calls both people higher. It brings peace, not confusion. It nurtures freedom, not fear. And when love is real, it does not demand your silence when you are hurting. It does not ask you to shrink, to bend, to break. It stands on truth. It breathes in grace. It builds up both hearts involved, not just one. You were created in the image of God. That means your love has power, it has weight, it has dignity. It is not to be thrown at the feet of someone who stomps on it. It is not to be poured into someone who sees it as their entitlement rather than your gift. When God calls you to love, He also calls you to wisdom. He calls you to courage. He calls you to see clearly and act accordingly. Discernment is not judgment, it is wisdom. It is the ability to see clearly when others are trying to blur the truth. It is the spiritual gift that allows you to navigate relationships, decisions, and situations with clarity instead of confusion. Discernment doesn't mean you are condemning someone. It means you are paying attention to their fruit, their patterns, their spirit. It means you are willing to see things as they are, not as you wish them to be. There's a growing fear in today's culture that if you call something out, you're being judgmental, that if you speak the truth about someone's toxic behavior, you're lacking grace. But that's not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches us to test the spirits, to examine the fruit, to walk as children of light, not to dwell in the shadows of denial. Discernment is not about placing yourself above someone. It's about protecting what is holy within you. When dealing with a narcissist, discernment is absolutely essential because a narcissist thrives on confusion. They manipulate perceptions. They twist conversations. They make you question your memory, your feelings, even your reality. They're not always loud and aggressive. Many narcissists are soft-spoken, intelligent, and highly charming. But behind the mask lies a deep well of control, self-importance, and deception. And if you don't have discernment, you find yourself trapped in their web. God gives discernment as a shield. It's not there to make you arrogant, it's there to make you aware. The enemy is subtle. He doesn't always show up with horns and a pitchfork. Sometimes he shows up in the form of a person who seems wonderful at first, but slowly chips away at your identity, your peace, and your purpose. Discernment allows you to sense the shift before it becomes damage. It gives you insight where your emotions might try to give it. Too many people confuse love with blindness. They think being loving means always giving the benefit of the doubt, always turning a blind eye, always assuming the best no matter what. But love that refuses to see clearly is not love, it is sentimentality. Real love is not afraid to look at reality. Real love partners with truth. And truth cannot be seen without discernment. You cannot walk in freedom if you are unwilling to recognize the chains. You cannot move forward if you keep telling yourself that the red flags are just misunderstandings. Narcissists are masters of false intimacy. They mirror your values, your dreams, your personality. At first, they feel like a perfect match. But over time, the charm fades and the control begins. If you're not discerning, you'll stay long after the warning signs appear. You'll justify, you'll second guess yourself. You'll keep giving more, hoping things will go back to the way they were at the beginning. But discernment sees patterns, not promises. It doesn't get swept away by charm. It waits to see consistency. Discernment is what helps you say, this is not okay, even when everything on the outside looks polished. It gives you the boldness to walk away from something that others may still praise. It gives you peace in your decision, even when others don't understand it. We need to stop shaming people for having boundaries. We need to stop calling discernment judgment just because someone had the courage to name a destructive pattern. God never told you to ignore the truth in order to keep the peace. He called you to be a peacemaker, not a peacekeeper. Peacemaking requires confrontation. It requires wisdom. It requires discernment. Discernment is what Jesus used constantly. He saw through the Pharisees' flattery. He saw the hearts of men. He didn't entrust himself to everyone because he knew what was in them. If Jesus, in all his love and compassion, used discernment in his relationships, how much more should we? We are not being unkind when we use discernment. You can love someone and still see their dysfunction clearly. You can have compassion for someone and still say, I will not let you harm me. Discernment doesn't harden your heart, it guards it. It keeps you from falling for deception masked as destiny. It allows you to serve God first, not the manipulations of others. Discernment is the quiet voice of the Holy Spirit saying, pay attention here. It's the pause before the yes. It's the check in your spirit when something doesn't align. And when you listen to it, when you trust it, it will lead you into truth every time. It will pull you out of confusion and into clarity. It will protect your spirit and preserve your purpose. Breaking free is not cruelty, it's courage. It's the bold step of choosing truth over illusion, self-respect over manipulation, and freedom over fear. Many people stay bound in toxic relationships, especially with narcissists, because they are afraid of what others will say. They fear being called selfish, cold, or unloving. They worry about how it will look to walk away, to set boundaries, or to finally say, enough. But true freedom begins when you stop living to appease others and start living to honor the truth. The world often confuses courage with confrontation and views boundaries as rebellion. But walking away from someone who repeatedly disrespects you is not a rebellion, it is a declaration. It is you declaring that you know your worth, that you will no longer settle for less than what God has called you to, that you are no longer available for games, manipulation, or emotional hostage-taking. It's not about revenge, it's about release. There are people who will never see your leaving as strength. They will call it betrayal. They will paint you as the villain because you dared to stop playing a role in their fantasy. Narcissists especially will twist your courage into cruelty. They will accuse you of being heartless, of giving up on them, of not being patient enough, but none of that is true. What's true is that you gave and gave until it hurt. You loved even when it wasn't returned. You stayed far longer than you should have. And when you finally found the strength to walk away, it wasn't because you stopped caring. It was because you finally started caring about yourself. So many people are conditioned to believe that self-care is selfish, that prioritizing your mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being is somehow unchristian or ungodly. But God never asked you to destroy yourself in the name of loyalty. He never asked you to be someone's emotional punching bag. Jesus laid down his life for others, yes, but he did so willingly for the purpose of salvation, not to be manipulated, used, or controlled. There is a difference between sacrifice and surrendering your identity to someone else's brokenness. Walking away takes strength. It takes clarity. It takes the ability to look at the chaos and say, I will not live in this any longer. It means choosing to walk through the discomfort of change rather than the familiarity of dysfunction. Because dysfunction can be comfortable when it's all you've known. But just because it feels familiar doesn't mean it's right. Just because someone has always treated you a certain way doesn't mean they are entitled to keep doing so. Courage is quiet. It doesn't always come with applause. It won't always be celebrated, but it is holy. It is sacred. It is the moment you reclaim your voice, your power, and your purpose. It is when you stop hoping that someone else will change and start realizing that the change must begin with you. It's not about making a scene. It's not about getting even. It's about getting free. There is this belief that if you really love someone, you'll never give up on them. But sometimes love means stepping back. Sometimes love means letting go. Not because you want to hurt them, but because you need to heal. Because enabling someone's narcissism is not love, it's a prison. And God did not create you to live in bondage to anyone's ego. Breaking free also means facing your own fears. The fear of being alone, the fear of starting over, the fear that maybe you're the problem. Narcissists are skilled at planting seeds of self-doubt. They make you question your memory, your motives, your sanity. And even when you leave, those doubts can follow you. That's why courage isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily walk. It's waking up every day and choosing to stand firm in what you know is right, even when the past tries to pull you back. You may lose people when you choose freedom. You may lose approval, but you will find peace. You will find your voice. You will find God's presence in a deeper way than you ever imagined. Because he dwells not in confusion, but in clarity. Not in manipulation, but in truth. And when you walk in that truth, you walk in alignment with him. Breaking free is not about being cruel. It's about being honest with yourself, with others, with God. It's about choosing the narrow road that leads to life over the wide road that leads to destruction. It's about stepping out of the fog and into the light. It's about honoring the life you've been given and refusing to spend it being diminished. My friend, hear me when I say this. God did not create you to be a prisoner to prideful people. He did not call you to carry the weight of someone else's ego on your back. He called you to walk in truth, to live in peace, and to love with wisdom. Kindness is holy, but without boundaries, it becomes a weapon used against you. Love is sacred, but it is never meant to be one-sided. Discernment is not judgment. It is the light that exposes the dark. And walking away from manipulation is not an act of cruelty. It is the beginning of your courage. Today, I believe God is calling someone here to wake up, to stop excusing what cannot be excused, to stop pouring living water into a broken vessel that refuses to be mended, to rise up in faith, in clarity, and in strength, and say, I will not bow to this anymore. You are not being unloving when you protect your peace. You are not being disobedient when you walk away from someone who refuses to change. You are honoring the Spirit of God within you. So stand tall, speak truth, set boundaries, and remember this: Jesus didn't die for you to be trapped. He died to set you free.